Hello and welcome everybody. It is 1 o'clock on the dot. So happy Friday and welcome to Intermediate Excel. We're going to start today with talking about relative and absolute references. So I've got a spreadsheet set up for us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to line total and we're going to talk about relative references first. So I'm just going to create a formula that is going to multiply our unit price times our quantity, and then I'm going to add in the sales tax. And we'll talk about sales tax in just a little bit. So in order to do that, in parentheses, I am going to multiply my unit price times my quantity. I'm going to go ahead and close those parentheses. And then I'm going to add in my sales tax, which is, I ranged it at 7.5. And when I hit the enter key, it's not yet going to add in my sales tax because I don't have that calculated yet. But I do have my line total. So again, I just simply multiplied the unit price times the quantity in parentheses, and then I added in our sales tax. And when I hit the enter key, it tells me that the total for our soft shell tacos are $59.68. I'm then going to come over here and use my fill handle just to simply pull that down, and it will copy. Oops, what happened? Oh, helps if you get the right cell. So I want to put in D4 as opposed to E4. Sorry about that. So now I'm going to go ahead and pull down, and I shouldn't get any errors. So using my relative reference, I built my formula, and then I went ahead and I used my fill handle to pull down. And you can see that I moved from row 4 to row 5 to row 6 and to row 7. So those are relative references, and that is what Excel defaults to. So now if I want to come over here and add in my sales tax, I'm going to go ahead and start my formula with an equal again. And to do my sales tax, I am simply going to go ahead and start that formula over again.
Hey, Julie, I am going to interrupt you so very quickly. It looks like we are not seeing any changes on your screen as you're doing them.
Oh, okay.
I would reshare your screen and do your whole desktop. This sometimes happens when you share just a window. I have no explanation for why, it just happens sometimes.
So basically the opposite of what I told you at the very beginning.
Okay, so let's try this. So
yeah, we can.
That looks better.
Okay.
Okay. I'm gonna have to move over here to another monitor, which means that I'll go ahead and just stop the video. There we go. Okay. So if you weren't seeing anything, I will go ahead and start over real quick.
Are you on your Excel window right now? We currently see a Zoom window, so I think your other desktop isn't being shared.
Okay, now can you see it?
Yep, we can. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so let's start that over. Let's talk about our relative reference first. So I'm going to go to E4 and I'm going to create a formula that's going to multiply our unit price times our quantity plus our sales tax. So I'm simply going to type in an equal sign. I'm going to open my parentheses and I'm going to multiply B4 times C4. I'm going to go ahead and close my parentheses and add in D4, which is where my sales tax will be calculated here in just a little bit. When I hit the enter key, it gives me the line total for our soft shell tacos, which is $59.60. I'm going to go ahead and use my fill handle, and I'm going to pull that down to the next 3 items, and it will fill in that formula with my relative reference. Like I was saying earlier, Excel defaults to a relative reference because that's what you're going to use the majority of the time. So when I go to double click on E4, it shows me that formula. I am in row 4, and when I double click on E5, you can see that I've moved down to row 5 and to row 6 and to row 7. Okay, so let's come up and talk about our sales tax here for just a second. So our sales tax, in order to calculate that, I'm going to type in an equal sign again to start my formula. I'm going to open my parentheses, and the sales tax is going to be B4 times C4, and then I'm going to go ahead and close my parentheses, and I'm going to multiply that total times 7.5, which is the sales tax that I have built in. So when I hit my enter key, you can see that I have my formula in there, and now I want to go ahead and fill this down as well. Now when I fill this down, you can see that it creates some errors for me. And the reason being is because I needed to create an absolute reference. So when I filled that down, let me just go ahead and show you what happened. When I filled that down, Excel automatically moved from cell E2 down to E3. And then again, it gave me a value because line E3 is a label as opposed to a value. Now I did get a rather outrageous amount for my sales tax in D6, but that's because it was multiplying times the 6407. So you can see that it's moving down. It's acting like a relative reference as opposed to an absolute reference. So let's go ahead and start over and delete that. So I'm going to come up to D4 again. I'm going to type in equal, and we'll recreate this, but this time we're going to put in an absolute reference as opposed to the default, a relative reference. So I've got B4 times C4 in parentheses, and then I'm going to multiply that times E2. Now E2, I need to create an absolute reference, and an absolute reference, what that means is that it's always going to look at that row and that column. So what I need to do is I need to put dollar signs in front of the E and in front of the 2. I don't necessarily have to put one in front of the E, but I like to throw caution to the wind. What that's doing is it's locking in the row and it's locking in the column. So I can sit here and I can manually move within this formula, and I can type in the dollar signs. Type in the dollar signs, or a keyboard shortcut to automatically set an absolute reference is F4. It's a little bit easier. And by F4, if you look at the very top row of your keyboard, you have function keys, F1, F2, F3, and so on. So you don't want to hold down the letter F and the number 4. You want to hit that function key at the top. So now I've created an absolute reference with my sales tax at 7.5. When I hit the enter key and I now fill this down, it automatically calculates the sales tax for me. Go ahead and take a look here. You can see that We moved down to row 5, but we're still looking at E2. And down to row 6, but we're still looking at E2, and so on. So that is the difference between a relative reference and an absolute reference. Again, those dollar signs is just going to lock in your row and your column. Okay, and I'll take questions at the end if you have any, if you want me to demonstrate that again. I have no problem sticking around if you've got some additional time. So that was our cell references. Now down here at the bottom, I've got some different tabs. And my next item that I'd like to talk about is History 101. And we're going to do some, we're just going to jazz this up a little bit. So we're going to do some cosmetics. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit today. And then we're going to insert the average function, and we're going to create a lookup table. So the first thing that I want to do is talk a little bit about making this look a little bit more attractive. For example, I have History 101 up here in cell A1. However, I want to center that across all of the columns that are being used. So currently, it looks like I'm using all the way from column A over to column I. Now, if I want to center that, most people might say, well, if you put it in F, it would be just about, halfway through. But that's something that you don't want to do because you can merge and center cells in Excel. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to highlight from A1 all the way over to I1. I'm going to come up underneath the alignment group. And you'll see that you have the option to merge and center those cells. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. It does exactly that. So now A1 through I1 act as one cell. So I just did a simple merge and center. If you click on the down arrow, you can see that you've got some other options. Let's say that maybe you decide that you don't want these merged. I can very simply come up here and say unmerge the cells, and it will do so. Or if you want to add additional rows to your merge and center, you can very easily do that as well. So let me go ahead and recreate that. So I'm going to highlight A1 through I1. Underneath the alignment group, come up to merge and center. I can simply click on that, and that is how you merge and center data in Excel. The next thing I want to look at is quiz 1 through quiz 5. Underneath the alignment group as well, you have the ability to angle or change the orientation of these labels. So I'm just going to go to the orientation. I'm going to click on the down arrow, and it gives us all these different options. So if I want to angle those, I can do so. If you want to rotate them up and down, I can put them that way. If you want a different angle, you can go to Format Cell Alignment, and it will allow you to change the orientation. Simply, I just click on the little red dot, and I'm holding down on my mouse and I'm moving it, or you can change the degrees manually below. So it just gives you, it makes it look a little bit fancier. It gives you some different options. The reason that I started using some of the orientation options was for printing. Many times when we go to print Excel documents, if we've got labels that are a little bit lengthy, this assists in allowing us to get maybe all of our information on one page. So that's one of the reasons that I use the different orientations, is simply not only for cosmetic purposes, but for printing purposes. So that's the orientation. And then let's say that I want to center that. So again, underneath the alignment group, I'm going to simply click on center, and it will center my information. Now above that, I want to take a minute to talk about the icons above. So these are alignments. So you can top align, you can middle align, or you can align at the bottom. Now, my row height is, I'm going to go ahead and increase that so you can see the changes in this a little bit easier. So right now you can see that the bottom alignment is grayed out. So we know that we are using bottom alignment, or we have that applied. If I come over and click on middle align, you can see how those labels move around. So that's another option that you have just to make your Excel workbook look, or worksheet look, a little bit fancier. Again, down here with our scores, each one of our quizzes in History 101 is worth 100 points. You can do the same thing with those. You can angle them if you'd like to, whatever the case may be. Now, let's say that you want borders around all of this information, or just part of it. If I highlight from C3 down to G4 and let up on my mouse, I can come underneath the font group and I can put borders around this if I'd like to. So I'm just going to put all borders, and you can see how it's changed that. That's angled off a little bit. I really don't like that. So I'm going to come back and I'm going to change the angle back to just the original. And again, with that highlighted, I can still center my maximum quiz score if I want to. So you can put borders around that. Now, I just did part of the workbook. You can certainly do the entire worksheet if you'd like to. I'm going to move down here to student. And again, we have our student, and then below there we have our last name and our first name. Perhaps I want to come over here and merge and center this information as well. So I'm going to highlight A5 and B5. And I'm going to go ahead and click on merge and center, and it will merge and center just those two cells. Let's say that I want to add a little bit of color. So I'm going to come back up to A1 and select History 101. Underneath the font group, of course, you've got, your bold, your italic, your underline, and all of that you're used to. But you also have the ability to fill in a specific color. So if you want to take maybe your favorite color, maybe your favorite color is green, and then you want to change the lettering to a different color, you can use your color palettes to do that. So now I'm going to come down and maybe just apply the same things to student, and just for a little bit of variation, I'm going to select maybe a lighter green for the last name and apply, you can't really see that. So maybe we'll just stick with the original, the default. Now let's say that I want to do this to first name, average, and grade as well. You don't have to do those individually. Once you have formatted one cell, you can use something underneath the clipboard, which is called the Format Painter. I didn't use this for a long time, and it is really nice. It's a great tool. It saves you a lot of time. So when I have A6 selected, and I'm going to come up here and I'm going to double click on Format Painter. And what that's going to do is, it's simply, just as it suggests, it's going to pick up the format of that cell. And I'm going to go ahead, like I said, I'm going to double click. And the reason that I double clicked is because I want to apply that format to more than one cell. If you just want to use it once, you can click once and it will be done. But if you want to apply it more than once, you need to double click. So when I do that, note that my mouse face changes to a plus sign, a white plus sign with a little paintbrush. And I can come over here and I can click on first name, I can click on average, I can click on grade. and apply that same format to 3 more cells. So the easiest way, in my opinion, to turn the format painter off is simply to hit the escape key. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the escape key, and you can see that it turned off my format painter. Okay, so now I'm going to come over here to average, and we're going to create an average. Now there's a couple of different ways that you could do this. Of course, I could type in equal sum. We talked about the sum built-in function last week. I can highlight from C7 all the way over to G7, close my parentheses, and divide by 5. And that will give you my average, right? I'm adding up the quiz scores for student number 1, which is Jill, and I'm dividing by 5. And when I hit the enter key, it's going to give me her average of 80. However, Excel has a built-in function for average. So I'm going to go ahead and make this a little bit easier on myself. I'm going to type in the equal sign, and I'm just going to start to type in average, and you can see that it populates this list below. So I can go ahead and double click on average, or I can type it out. I'm going to go ahead and double click on average. It inserts average, opens my parentheses for me, and now I can simply either type in A7 colon G7 and close my parentheses. It will give me my average, again, 80. Or another way of doing that is I could type in equal and type in average, open my parentheses, and I can use my mouse to select that data range, and it will automatically put in C8 colon G8. Now I can manually close my parentheses, or if I hit the enter key, because I have the newest version of Excel, it will automatically close the parentheses for me. So I'm going to go ahead and close my, or hit the enter key, and it will place that. So it tells me that Bud Sickles has an average of 78.2. Of course, we can simply use our fill handle. So if I go ahead and double click, again, it's going to insert a relative reference. So as I move down, you can see it's going from row 8 to row 9, 10, and so on. And that is your relative reference. Okay, now we want to insert a grade, and this is where I'm going to use a lookup table. So before we get started, I'm just going to go over here to another worksheet, and what I've done is I went ahead and I created a grading scale prior to this webinar so that we had everything set up and ready to go. And you can see that it's a very simple grading scale. It's simply saying that from 0 to 59 is an F, from 60 to 69 is a D, from 70 to 79 is a C, from 80 to 89 is a B, and so on. So I just simply put this information into a table. So I'm going to go back to History 101. And in I7, I'm going to type in equal and then lookup. So when I double click on lookup, it opens the parentheses for me, and it kind of gives us directions or a cheat sheet as to what we need to do. But obviously, I'm going to walk you through this. So I'm going to type in equal lookup. And the first thing I need to do is tell it what does it need to, what's the average? What does it need to look at? So the first thing that I need to put in here is H7. Obviously, I'm putting in the cell coordinate, not the value itself, because those values may change. So I'm going to type in equal lookup, open the parentheses, H7, and then I'm going to put in a comma, and I'm going to go over to the worksheet grading scale. And when I click on that, I want you to look at the formula bar, because what it did was it typed in equal lookup, and then I typed it in, and then H7, which is what we want the lookup table to refer to, comma, and then I went to my worksheet that I have called grading scale. I'm going to go ahead and select from A1 down to B6 and highlight that table. So now when I hit my enter key, it takes me back to History 101 and tells me that this grade is a B. So I'm going to go in and just make sure that the lookup table is working correctly. I'm going to come over here and let's say Jill had an opportunity to retake quiz 1, so the grade moved from 78 to a 100. And when I hit the enter key, that didn't move my average enough to get out of the B range. So let's come over here to the 56 for quiz 3 and move that from a 56 to 100. And now you can see that it moved her grade from the 80% range to the 90% range and changed her grade from a B to an A. Same difference if I come over here and I type in some zeros, she rapidly went from an A to a C to an F. So let me go ahead and demonstrate that again. I'm going to come down to my second student in my grade book. I'm going to type in equal and then just begin to type in lookup. I'm going to go ahead and double click on lookup. It inserts the lookup function for me, opens my parentheses. I'm going to select or click on H8, which is where Bud's average for History 101 is located. I'm going to type in a comma. I'm going to come over here to my grading scale, and I'm going to select this table. Now, note that when I clicked on grading scale, it automatically put in grading scale in quotes and an exclamation point for me. And then when I selected A1 through B6, it inserted that table for me. When I hit the enter key, it will pop me back to History 101, and it tells me that Bud's grade is currently a C. Okay, so once you put in 1, you can certainly use your fill handle to fill that in. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to double click, and we have some issues. Okay, so let's take a look at what happened. So when I went down to my next student, it tells me that it was looking at A2 through B7. And then if I go down to my next student, it went to A3 through B8. And my next student, A4 through B9. So as we learned in cell references, our relative reference is what it defaults to. And with an absolute reference, we need to make sure that we lock in the rows and the columns. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this. And we're going to start over. So I'm going to type in equal and lookup. Double click on lookup. I'm going to ask it to look at H7. Put in a comma. Click on grading scale. Select from A1 down to B6, which is where the data is for my lookup table. Now, in order to stop Excel from moving down rows when I fill this in, I need to put in those dollar signs. Or as I said earlier, if I hit the F4, it will automatically lock in column A, row 1 through column B and row 6. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the enter key, and it still tells me that Jill failed the class. So again, I like to test this out just a little bit to make sure that the formula is working correctly and that it wasn't a lucky guess that 53% is a failing grade. So I'm going to change one of those zeros to a 100, and when I hit the enter key, it tells me that her current grade is a C. So let's do that one more time. I'm going to go ahead and type in equal lookup, double click on lookup, tell Excel to look at G8 or H8 in this case, excuse me, put in a comma. I'm going to come over here to grading scale. I'm going to select A1 down to B6. You can manually put in the absolute reference or those dollar signs, or you can hit F4 and it will automatically put those in for you. And I'm going to go ahead and hit the enter key, and indeed Bud has a C as well. Now when I use my fill handle, because I put in my absolute reference, it's going to lock in from A1 to B6, and I can use my lookup table appropriately. So here I have some pretty low grades going on. Personally, if I was an instructor or a teacher, I would be looking at maybe the quizzes or my teaching style, because those are fairly low grades, but that's completely up to you. So some of you might be saying to yourself, well, what if I change the name of worksheet grading scale? Then do I have to start over? The answer is absolutely not. If I double click on grading scale and just abbreviate this to GS and click outside to place GS, come back over to History 101. Now when I look at my formulas, it automatically changed grading scale simply to GS. So Excel is intuitive. It knew that you changed the name of that worksheet, and it automatically changed it in each one of these formulas. So that does not create more work on your behalf. Okay, so that is a lookup table. So when I used the example, of course, was a small grade book. So maybe you're looking at sales, quarterly sales, weekly sales for your company. You could come over and create, a lookup table of, this person sold between 0 and 1,000, and that's low. And between 1,001 and 3,000 is a medium sale, or an average sale. And then anything above 3,000 might be above average. So you can set up your lookup table however you want to. I just simply used a grading scale. Okay, now I'm going to come over and we're going to look at the ability to sort and filter information. So what I have here is some data, salespeople, salesperson, different regions, your order amount, and the month. Currently, it looks like my data in this table is arranged by order amount. So if I want to change that, let's say that I come over and I click on column A. Remember that you need to always select the data that you want Excel to manipulate. So if I come over to column A and I go over to the editing group, there's something called sort and filter. Because I have column A selected, it knows that those are all labels, and I can select from A to Z or Z to A. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on sort from A to Z, and Excel will populate this sort warning. And more than likely, you want it to expand the selection, because if I don't expand the selection, then it's just going to alphabetize column A, but it's not going to bring with it the appropriate data in columns B, C, and D. So I want it to expand the selection. That's what it defaults to. It just gives you a little warning, and I'm going to go ahead and click on sort, and I now have all of my salespeople sorted from A to Z. If I come over to and click on column C, go back up underneath the editing group to sort and filter, now you can see that Excel knows that you are sorting values. So I can either sort from smallest to largest or largest to smallest. I'm going to go ahead and select from largest to smallest. I'm going to tell it that I want it to expand the selection. Go ahead and click on sort. And now you can see our order amounts are from smallest or largest to smallest. Let's come down here to Chris Walter in C40, and I'm going to change that value. So I'm going to type in 20,000. Now, when I hit the enter key, it doesn't automatically apply the sort. If you change your values, you need to select that column again, come back over to the editing group, and tell it that you want it again to sort from largest to smallest. We're going to go ahead and expand the selection, and now you can see that the 20,000 is on top. So that is a very simple way to sort your data. Another thing that you might want to do, I'm going to come back over here to column A, and I'm going to sort from A to Z, get all of my salespeople in alphabetical order. Let's say that you want to focus just on one salesperson. Now, we don't have a whole lot of data right here, so it's not that difficult to come in here and say, okay, here's what, here's Kathy, here's Michael, here's William, and so on. But if you have a lot more data, or you just want to focus on a specific person, I can go ahead and select column A again, go back over here, and this time we're going to filter. So I'm going to click on filter, and note when I did that, nothing happened, but it does now have a little arrow pointing down. And when I click on that down arrow, it gives me the ability to select all of my salespeople, or to just focus on maybe Kathy and Richard. So when I select as Kathy and Richard, click on OK, it filters out the rest, allowing me to focus just on those two salespeople. Again, to bring everybody back, a lot of our data disappeared. It did not delete. It simply is not being shown. So I can do a couple of different things. I can come back down and I can tell it to select all and click on OK. Or let's go in and focus on Shannon Thompson and click on OK. Now we just have Shannon. If you want to bring all of your data back, another way of doing that is to turn the filter off. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that filter off, and it will bring back all of our data. Again, if you want to filter out maybe just by region, I can come over to column B and select that, turn that filter back on, come back over here and tell it that we just want to see the East region. I can select that and it gives me just the East region. So you have multiple ways that you can view your data. So we'll go with the East and the West, and it gives me just that. I can go ahead and bring that back, click on OK. And again, if I want to turn that off, I can just come back over to the editing group and turn it off. Same thing, if you want to focus just on a specific month, you can certainly turn the filter on over here and tell it that you want to just look at January, click on OK. It gives me all of my data for just January. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn that filter off. And this time I'm going to select all 4 columns. When I select all 4 columns and come over here to filter, it will allow me to put a filter on all 4 columns. So if I want to just look at Melissa, I can select Melissa. If I just want to look at the month of January, I can select just January. And you can filter out more than 1 column at one time. So again, I just selected all 4 columns or however many columns you're working with, and I turned the filters on all 4 columns where I have data. And you can then manipulate that information. Maybe I want to look at Richard and Chris, and maybe I want to look at just those 2 salespeople in the month of February. So it allows me to filter out all the remainder of the information. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that filter back off. The next thing that I wanted to look at underneath order amount is a nice way of being able to look at data. So I'm going to select column C, and then I'm going to come over here to conditional formatting. And under conditional formatting, it allows me to have specific cells highlighted. So let's say that at a glance, I want to see all of the order amounts that are greater than $1,000. So I'm going to type in $1,000. You can see that this is live, that it's making adjustments to my table as I'm typing. I probably don't want that highlighted in red. I can come over and change that if I want to. Let's say that I want it highlighted in yellow instead. I can go ahead and click on OK, deselect that, and now I can very easily see all of the order amounts that are larger than $1,000. Same thing if I select column C, come back to conditional formatting, I can highlight cells that are less than, and maybe I want that to be less than $200. So in this case, the light red fill would be appropriate because, in my opinion, that is below average for a month. So I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. I'm going to deselect that to make it a little bit easier to see. And I now have all of my sales above 1,000 highlighted in yellow and below 200 highlighted in red. Now you'll note that when I scroll down, it applied this to the entire column. In order to change that, I can come up and simply select the data where I want the conditional formatting. So if you don't want it to go below or to impact the entire column, I can simply highlight just the data that I want to work with. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight column C again, come back to conditional formatting, highlight cells, and now I'm going to come down to, nope, that's not where I want to go. I'm going to, yeah, here we go. I want to go to conditional formatting, and I'm going to clear the rules. So let's say that I want to change the rules. I'm going to go ahead and clear the rules from the selected cells. And when I do that, it will deselect. So this time I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select from A2 down to, or excuse me, C2 down to C40. And I'll go ahead, back up to my conditional formatting, and I'm going to highlight the cells that are greater than $1,000. You can see that it has built in the light red fill with dark, yellow with yellow, green, and so on. If you don't like any of those options, you can come over here to custom format, and you can change the fill yourself. So let's say that I want everything higher than $1,000 to be highlighted in blue. It gives you a little sample. I'm going to go ahead and click on OK, and that's my custom. So when I click on OK, that's a little bit hard to see. Probably not something you want to select. Perhaps if you're going to select the dark blue, you also want to go in and select a lighter text color. So if I go back into highlight cells, greater than, back to 1,000, I can go back down to custom format, tell it to fill with the blue. But now over here at the top, I've got fill, I've got different tabs. I have border, I have font, and I have numbers. So I'm going to come over here to font and to my color, and tell my color to be white as opposed to black. When I click on OK, it will apply that conditional formatting. So again, you can use the built-in conditional formatting that Excel has for you, using either the red, the yellow, or the green, or you can go to custom format, come back over to fill. Maybe if I want this one to be orange, click on OK, and click on OK again, and it applied orange. Then I had the entire column selected, so it did go below the table that we're working with. Okay, at this point, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to questions. So if you have any questions, please let me know. I think I have I'm viewing this. It says no open questions. I'll give you a chance to go ahead, and I'll go ahead and open up the chat as well. Oh, so sure. If you save the Excel workbook with the filters turned on, if you save it, you certainly can. When you open it back up, those filters will still be applied. The next question is, can you sort two columns? Great question, absolutely. That's funny, I was thinking about this today, so I'll go ahead and demonstrate that for you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select column B because I want to, what I'm going to do is, the question was, can you separate data from one column into two? So you'll notice that in my salesperson column, I have the last name, comma, first name. Let's say that I want the last name to be in one column, the first name to be in another column. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to make room for or insert another column. I'm going to select B. I'm going to insert, because when you insert cells, they always insert to the left if you're inserting a column and above if you're inserting a row. So if I go ahead and click on insert, because I want to make room for this data. If I don't do that, then what it would do was it would copy over my region. And I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select column A. I'm going to come over to data, and I'm going to use something underneath the data tools. And this is called text to columns. Before I discovered the text to columns, there were many times when I manually did a copy and paste in every single cell to move a first name or a last name or various data into two separate columns, but Excel does all of that for you. So again, I inserted my column to give it room to separate this data. I selected column A. I went over to my data ribbon. I'm going to go to the data tools, click on text to columns, and you've got two different options, delimited or fixed width, and it defaults to delimited. Characters such as commas or tabs separate each field meaning first name and last name. And it also gives you a little preview down here, which is nice so that you know what's going on with your data. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click on next. And now I need to tell it that it is being separated not by a tab, but by a comma. And if it's not in this list, you can put a check mark in other and put that character in there. But in this case, a comma is built in. So I'm going to go ahead, click on comma. Now you can see, again, it's giving me a preview of what this is going to look like, which looks good to me. I'm going to go ahead and click on next and click on finish. And go ahead, it says there's already data, which there really isn't. So I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. And now it's separated my first name from my last name. So I can change my labels if I want to. Just put in last name and first name. And away we go. That took, what, 30 seconds as opposed to a very long, tedious separating out first and last names. Other questions? Any other questions? All right, well, thank you, folks. That's all that I... That is all I have for you for today. Thank you for joining me this afternoon. Have a great weekend. Stay safe and stay healthy.